In this video, I want to do the advanced solution for the first assignment, which is to add handling for negative numbers in the use of the latitude and longitude. So a sign will indicate direction. Actually, you can see this in the comments. So depending on whether or not it's north, south, or east, west, you'll get a positive or negative number. So if we're talking about a longitude, then it's going to be east-west. If we're talking about latitude, it's going to be north-south. And so if we're in the northern hemisphere, then it's a positive number. A southern hemisphere, it's a negative number. Likewise, if we're in the eastern hemisphere, then it's positive, and in the western hemisphere, it's negative. Okay, so what we want to do then is do the computation here, assuming that the negative number would be placed before degrees in the DMS to degrees computation. So so we have to do two things. The first thing that we need to do is we need to compute the sign. So is it going to be positive or negative? And then we need to make sure that we use the absolute value of degrees when doing the computation, because that positive or negative is merely just an indicator of location on the hemisphere. It isn't actually saying it's a negative number, but rather it's giving us the side of the hemisphere. Okay, so let's first compute the sign. So I'm going to do a double sign equals, and now I'm going to introduce some new notation, and this new notation is the conditional assignment. And what it does is it takes a condition, and so the condition I want to compute is see whether or not degrees is less than 0. So this is going to come out with a Boolean value, so if degrees is less than 0, it's false. If degrees is greater than 0, it's true. So if it is less than 0, meaning it's a negative number, then I'm going to make the sign be negative 1.0. Otherwise, so after the colon, I'm going to set it to a positive number. Okay, so what I'm going to do later is I'm going to take this value and I'm going to multiply it by the result, and that will give us the proper sign for the result. Okay, the second thing I need to do is make sure that I use the absolute value for the degrees. And the way that I'm going to do this is by using a math function. There's a library called math. And what I'm going to do is change the degrees here to math.abs. And this is the absolute value function within the math class. This names an actual function, and there's a bunch of different math functions that we can use. And this is just going to return me the absolute value of degrees and replace the degrees with that. Okay, so now I need to multiply the entire thing by sine. Sine times math.abs degrees. So this is my former function. Okay, so let's run this, and when I run this, I'm going to use the values of my previous that are in the comments of the next method. So I'm going to call this. Let's see. This is 87, 43, 41. Actually, I should make 87 negative to make sure that that's going to compute right. Okay, so now you see here that we've incorporated the sign in the computation of the decimal from degrees, minutes, and seconds. Now we need to do the same thing for the next piece, going from degrees to DMS, and I've actually got the solution already coded up here. We have the same issues as we did before, and I'm going to use actually the same solution. And so I've got decimal less than 0, and using conditional assignment, I'm going to make the sign either negative or positive. And again, I'm going to take the absolute value of the number so that the negative number doesn't actually have an impact on the final value. I'm going to set that equal to coordinate, and instead of using decimal as my actual value, I'm going to do the rest of my computations using coordinate. So same solution. So here's the degrees taking the integer part of coordinate. We're subtracting degrees from the coordinate and so forth. So all of that is the same. And then here at the bottom, we need to incorporate the sign in our solution. So the way that I'm going to do this is, instead of using north and south and east and west, again I'm going to use the negative number on the degrees as my representation. There are some things that I could do otherwise, but then I would have to be able to determine whether or not I was talking about the northern or the northern versus southern hemisphere, or eastern versus western hemisphere. I didn't want to have to deal with that at the moment, and just so we're just going to assume we're using a negative number in this case. So if it's in the southern hemisphere, it's negative. It's in the western hemisphere, it's going to be negative, and we'll just use that one representation. Okay, so now I'm using a character, which we haven't really talked that much about, but you've seen it in the podcast, as the representation, and then I'm just going to create this whole string representation for the output. And I've just taken that sign and put that into my output. As we go through doing string concatenation and start looking at more things of how to actually output primitive types of strings, you're going to see a lot of this. And actually, one of the videos that you should have watched by now actually talks about this a little bit. So anyway, that is the solution, the slightly more advanced solution for doing assignment number 1. Again, we're using the conditional assignment here to do the comparison of values and setting the value based on a conditional. So let's run this last piece here. Save it and run it. Again, I'm going to use my same solution as before. Let's first let's take negative 87. I don't actually remember what the, oh yeah, there it is. Negative 87.728055. So if I do decimal to degrees, minutes, seconds, you see here that we've put the negative number in front of degrees, and then we have minutes and seconds. Okay, so that concludes this video.